Schwally. I'm making a video today about making a takedown compact bucksaw. This is in response to Dave Canterbury's video about doing the same thing. I'm just making this one out of PVC and I thought I'd share it with you. I really like his idea about let's learn together. So let's learn together. Maybe you guys can give me some ideas about how to improve this design too. So this is all about making this into this, a 24-inch bucksaw. This is a pretty simple design with simple tools. You could easily make this in an hour or so. You could do this as a project for Boy Scouts or Boy Pioneers. Be the kind of thing that you could do this 1 week, and then the next camp out they could all bring their saws and mow down the entire forest.
Okay, so here's how this works. Starting from folded up, I'm going to tie this cord on the top here. Take out these eye bolts. And let's pull it apart. Inside, you've got your blade, you've got your center bar, and you've got this twister to tighten it all up. So, put it together. First thing you do is take the blade, put it in here, put an eye bolt through there. Now I made this fairly quick and crude, as I said, just to see if it would work, building it quick and crude. If you use better tools and more time, then you end up with a better final product. It still is functional, quick and crude. Center bar snaps on here. And then you take this cord, and through there. Tie a simple square knot. And use this thing. And remember to wrap it the right direction. Tie it up until it's all nice and snug. And on the other side, there's a little hole that snaps into right there. We're done.
Now I made this pretty quick and crude just to prove the design. Obviously if you use better tools and better workmanship you'd end up with a better product. So let's get to it. Let's see what it takes to build this 24-inch bucksaw. Okay, as for parts, what I started with is this 24-inch bow saw replacement blade. I got it for $4.98. You could get a heavier duty one. I just got this one because it was convenient and cheap. And then you need a couple pieces of PVC. This is a piece that I have left of, it's 1-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe. You can get a 5-foot section for $168, and since I'm only using about 2 feet, then you can actually use one piece of this for 2 different saws. The same for this 1/2-inch PVC. It's also Schedule 40. Again, it comes in a 5-foot section. That's for $128. Then I also have this piece of 3/16-inch steel rod. A 3-foot section of that is, what was it, $2.52. And then I have a couple of eye bolts. They're 1/4-inch eye bolts. I had to trim them. They were too long for my uses, but that's the only 1/4-inch ones that I could find. These, they come with nuts, and they're 52 cents each. And then I just use this cordage. You can use paracord, you can use any kind of small, 1/4-inch rope, and that's it. So you add all of that together and you end up with less than $12. You can make yourself a saw, and because of the fact that you can use this PVC for more than one saw and this rod for more than one saw, if you add just simply another blade and a couple of more eye bolts for a few more bucks, then for $18 you can make 2 saws. So that's really all you need. Now there's a couple of options here too. Instead of those eye bolts, you might want to use one of these J bolts. This is kind of interesting. It can actually, let me take this off and I'll show you. It can give you a different lower profile finished product when you're folding it up. So if you have to jam this into your backpack or something like that, this will still allow you to tie that cord through it for a carry strap, but you can see how it's a lot lower profile. You can also have some fancier nuts that are countersunk nuts on the other side. If you put a wing nut on the other side, that would work too. Of course, it sticks out farther. You can have some little thumb screws instead of these eye bolts, but I like the eye bolts because I can always tie something to them. Anyways, you got a whole bunch of different options. I picked these up because they were cheap and they were convenient, but you might want to play around with it and come up with other ideas on your own. And here's another question. You may wonder on these bucksaws, why are the sides angled in like that? Why can't they just be straight up and down? And the answer is that's for strength. To demonstrate that, I'm going to use a highly sophisticated piece of equipment called a Lego block. Let's pretend that these two pieces, these black pieces, are our handles. This blue one is our blade. I'm going to attach that here. And this yellow one here is in the center for our center bar. Now if I put them together like that so the sides are parallel, and then I attach my, my tension string across the top like this, now you'll notice that this whole thing can pretty easily pivot and twist and bend, and it's not going to be very strong for cutting through anything. So now with a slight change to the design, take this piece out. I'll take these two sides and I'll bend them in a little bit. I'll attach this on a hole a little bit farther in. So now it's at an angle. And now when I attach my string, and you'll see how this actually resists moving. It still does move a little bit just because it's Lego blocks and this is a rubber band, but you understand how this can be a lot stronger. This trapezoidal shape is a lot stronger than a parallelogram. Geometry. Well, the first piece I would make is the handle pieces. Now the length is kind of important, and it really depends on how long your saw blade is. From the center hole to the center hole of this particular saw blade is 23 1/8 inches. So what that means is that each one of these chunks from the hole that I'm using on this end here to go into there to the center has to be half of that 23 1/8 inches. Plus I'm adding a ½ inch to the outside. So what I did is I just made them 12 inches long. It's pretty close. It's within a 16th. Gives me a little play in the center. Just like that. So this is 12 inches long. Now the hole at the top where the cord goes through is not really important. You just drill a hole at the top. It doesn't really matter. You might want to round that off a little bit so you don't, put undue strain on your cord. The hole and this is a 1/4 inch hole. This is a 1/4 inch hole at the bottom. Now the hole at the bottom's a little interesting because it has to be off center, because of when you fold it up, and I'll show you that in a second, when you fold it up it has to have enough room for the blade to fit in there. You also have to cut a notch for the blade to slip through like that. Now on this particular one I had a notch on both sides, but I'm going to show you on the new one how to do it with the notch only on one side. It makes it less confusing, less work. And then you have to drill this hole in the center. Now from this 1/4 inch hole to the center of this one is 5 inches, and this hole has to be big enough to fit this center bar in. Now the center bar is ½ inch PVC, so it's, of course, on the outside it's more like 7/8. But you did cut a little notch through this, so that means that it's a little bit less than 7/8. I figure if you get a 11/16 hole saw, you could cut this pretty easily. I don't have a hole saw, so I just use a spade bit, which isn't really the best thing to cut through a plastic tube with, but I used a spade bit that was 3/4, and I used a Dremel tool that kind of smoothed it out a little bit so that it would just fit in there nice and tight. The idea is you want that hole to be as small as possible to make this piece as strong as possible, but you of course want to have this piece be a little bit loose in there so that it can play around a little bit and you don't put a lot of stress on your members here. Now I'm cutting this with a miter saw. You could do this by hand like I did with the first one. Now the first thing that I would do on these handles is cut this off-center hole where the blade attaches to it. The reason why I would do that first is because you can be a little sloppy with how off-center that is, but everything else needs to line up with that. So make sure you get this hole in first, and then you can kind of figure out where the center line is to do the rest of your stuff. Now if I had a drill press, this would be perfect. I could just put it underneath there exactly where I want it and drill press it down, but I don't. I got to do it by hand. So if you're like me, just do the best you can. What I do is I try and get the blade, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, hopefully you can, instead of the drill going straight down through the center, I try and make it so that it's about 3/4 of an inch from the hole Let me hold it like this so that I can point. It's about 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the drill bit to the inside of this. So that's about where you want it. Good luck. Hopefully you can see that right there, where the drill bit is off center, and it's about 3/4 of an inch from the drill bit down to this bottom here. Okay, now that you've got your hole drilled through here, and I made a mark that was perpendicular to that hole. Now, everything else is going to have to be lined up with that. Here's an easy way to draw a straight line on a cylindrical object. You put it up against the door jamb like this. Then you just trace right down the door jamb. Make sure your wife doesn't care that you left a mark on her door jamb. Now you measure 5.5 inches down from the end. It's 1/2 inch down to this hole, and then another 5 inches from there. So right here is where you're going to drill your big hole for the center bar. At the far end, I make marks like this that are like a cross, so that I can make holes that are perpendicular here to the center line. This is where the cord is going to go through, and they're both 1/2 inch down. Ta-da! Now these two PVC pieces here, the handles and then the center bar, are of course the hardest pieces of this entire saw. And this is probably the hardest step, is trying to rip this slit through this PVC. And the reason why I say it's the hardest step is because you pretty much have to use a table saw for it. I don't know of a safer, better way to do it. And it's kind of difficult to rip PVC like this because it's round and it does tend to twist. But I'll show you how I do it. But you just set your saw blade up, 1/2 inch or so, and run this through. And I would do the whole 5-foot section and then cut it later. Now this piece has 15-degree angles on both ends. I also rounded them off with a file just so that they'd seat in there better, but that's not really required. Has a hole on this one side. I always put the slit down. Has a hole on the one side for that twister to notch into, and then it has a hole, 2 holes in the other side for the twister to store in, like that. We'll show you how to drill those holes after you actually make this, because it kind of depends on how you bend this as to where those holes go. Now here's a question. How do you know how long to make this center bar? I mean, you know how long your blade is, and you know that the sides are going to be angled in 15 degrees, but how long do you make this without making it first and then measuring it? Because you can't make it unless you know how to. Anyways, so you know how you do it? Math. Yeah, that's right. You're probably that kid that was sitting in school saying, "Teacher, why do I have to learn this? I'm never going to use this in real life." Well, guess what? Don't believe those lies anymore, because here you go. Math.
Okay, let's draw what we got. First we got 2 handles, one on either side. They each have a hole in the bottom where our blade is attached. This is the blade. Now they also have a big hole up here where the center bar goes across. Now I know that the blade is 23 1/8 inches. I also know that this dimension up to the center of that hole is 5 inches. But this dimension in between, I have no idea. So we gotta figure that out. Let's draw this a little differently. Here's the blade across the bottom. This line with this 15-degree angle is gonna represent my handles. This is 5 inches on this side up to here. But this up here I don't know, that's X. And it's the same on the other side, so another X. Now I know that the sine of an angle is equal to the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So the sine of my 15-degree angle is the opposite x over the hypotenuse 5. That is the sine of 15 degrees. Now I know that the sine of 15 degrees from my calculator is 0.259 equals x over 5. I can multiply this by 5, both sides, and this cancels out. So this gives me x is equal to 1.29 from my calculator. Now, remember I have 2 x's. So 2 times x equals 2.59. And now what I have to do is I have to take this from the 23 1/8. So 23 1/8 minus this x minus this x will give me the dimension in between here. So 23.125 minus 2.59 equals 20.5. I'm rounding these off. Now I got one more problem. Let me draw this a little bit bigger on the side here. Here's my hole where the blade is attached, right? And here's the big hole where the center bar goes through. But notice how this center line does not line up with the edge of this bar where it connects against the inside wall here. So I have to add this dimension right here, which I'm adding 3/4 of an inch to both sides. So that's times 2 equals 1.5 inches. So 20.5 plus 1.5 equals 22. That's my answer.
Cliff Notes version. Make this bar 22 inches long. Yeah, that's a good example of what happens when you try and cut this PVC when there's a slit cut in the tube. My advice is to try and cut it with the slit facing away from the blade, not towards the camera. I was trying to show you guys, but it obviously shattered. So. Now I measure from the longest part of this 15-degree cut to 22 inches. Make a mark right there, and then I'll cut that off. Now I'll take this square cut end and I'll round it off like the other end so that it fits inside of the handles better. Now the only other part that you're going to have to make is this little twister piece, which is that 3/16 inch steel rod. I just bent both sides down the same direction. It's, you know, 1/4 inch is good enough for that. The length of this piece, it has to be at least 6 inches. If you want to try and maximize the number of pieces that you get out of your 3-foot piece, then make it exactly 6 inches, but I made this one a little bit loose. It's more like probably 7.5 or 8 inches. So I'll measure off 7 inches of this steel rod, and I'll cut it right there. Now that I've got this piece done, I've marked right in the center of my center bar, and I'm going to drill a hole right here, right on the side, offset from where this notch is for the blade. And that's going to be where this notch is into when it tightens up. Also, I've marked right here where I'm going to drill 2 holes where this is going to get stored. Now it has to get stored right next to the blade, as close to vertical as possible. If you try and store it off on the side or something, then the whole thing won't fit inside the handles. So you're going to have to try and drill these holes as vertical as you can, as close to this slit as you can, without getting bound up in there and destroying the whole thing. Now the last thing is I need to take these eye bolts and cut them down to the right length. There. So here's all the pieces. You see that I've cut the notch in these handles. I did it with the miter saw. You can also do it just by hand with the hacksaw. It doesn't have to be very wide. It only has to be wide enough to fit this blade. So I painted this last night, and this is the final product. Now, a couple things I did differently this time around. I painted this center bar and the twister blaze orange, so when you're setting this down out in the woods, then you'll be able to find it easier. And for the same reason, I also put this little streamer on the twister bar, because if you ever drop that in the ground, that's the hardest thing to find. I also put duct tape on these handles. The idea with that is that hopefully that they won't get scratched and dinged up as much, but they may end up just getting gummy in your hands. I'm not sure yet. That brings me to another point. I haven't used this like extensively. I've just tested it out. So if you guys make this and find suggestions or other ideas to improve the design, please add comments down below. But this is it. It's my take on the PVC takedown Bucksaw. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next time.